Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome back to another Half-Bred Chaos reaction. Today's video is, I guess, answering a question I really didn't think needed answering. This is, how many chapters does Deltarune have anyway? Yeah, so, I assumed we were all kind of in agreement that it was going to be 7, given that, you know, when you load up the chapter select screen, there's 7 spots. So unless Toby does a sneaky on us, and then, oh, when chapter 7 releases, the option to flip to page 2 happens, I don't really think we're going to get more than 7. Also, given that, you know, there was the whole theory talking about how there's going to be, like, 1 chapter, like, per day of the week until Azrael comes home. So, yeah, I mean, granted, this is, like, one of Half-Bred Chaos's shorter videos. It's just, it's almost 13 minutes. So I don't know what they're going to get into here. But again, the fact that they've made a video, you know, about it, asking the question, there has to be a reason for it, right? So, yeah, we should probably get this thing started then. So, yeah, of course, as always, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet for some reason. Corner video will lead to my Let's Play of the day. And yeah, if you like this or any other video I've made, I would very much appreciate it if you gave the video a like and subscribe to my channel. You know, all those things help my channel in the algorithm, because I'm hoping for my channel to hit 5,000 subscribers sometime this year, hopefully. But yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
Howdy. How many chapters will Deltarune have? This sounds like such a straightforward question, and yet it seems like all who quest for the answer inevitably get lost in an ever-winding mind maze of Toby's design. Why? How? Allow me to explain. The trouble starts with the Deltarune website. When the game was first announced, there was only 1 chapter and no chapter select, which made this website our only source of information on the matter.
Yeah.
In the very first status update, outlining the game's development so far, it describes the progress towards completing chapters 2 and 3+, while cryptically warning us that these numbers can be somewhat deceptive. What smells like foreshadowing? Oh hey, look, it's chapter 2, which finally introduces a chapter select. And is that 7 chapters? Holy Kungadero. The plus in 3+ is carrying 4 whole chapters on its back. What a champ. So, case closed, right? There will be 7 chapters and we can go home now, right? But then, why do the chapter icons go up to 9? I mean, 10. But I guess that it's not hard to just copy-paste the same blank sprite a few extra times. It's not like he has fully rendered and animated sprites of other. I'm sorry, is that a sprite for chapter 10? You bet your bacon I'm delaying the video to check on this. Okay, so you know how anytime you load up a chapter you've already beaten, it plays the Legend of Deltarune cutscene?
Yeah, so where did you find this? Sorry, I was a bit speechless there for a second.
Well, after the cutscene is over, it displays the Deltarune logo, before whispering in a spooky voice. The game files call this the process logo, written in all caps, because, of course it is, but that's not why we're here.
Yes.
We're here because starting in chapter 2, the process logo also displays the chapter number, and unlike the other parts of the chapter select code, this one isn't just printing off text. Someone actually had to make individual sprites for each of the chapters, and then alter the code to choose a sprite based on the chapter you're playing. What's weird is, chapter 1's isn't actually used, because chapter 1 still uses the old script from before the update. And
oh, really?
Is that okay? I'm gonna need us to hold that thought for later in the video, because I have one more bone to pick with this.
Okay, now I can see where, you know, why this video was made. Okay, so we have chapter 0 all the way up to chapter 10, but the chapter select screen only goes up to 7. Okay, you know, here's what I just thought of. So, you know, the whole thing with chapter 0 could potentially be a flashback, but maybe, you know, chapters 1 to 7 will be the main game, and then 8 to 10 and 0 would be special chapters that you can only play and only unlock if you complete certain routes. So, I mean, anybody who's been watching my my Deltarune reactions should have heard my most recent theory and that I'm thinking that there might be more than just 2 routes in the game. To put it simply, just for time's sake, my theory was that we'll have the regular route where you play the game normally, you make friends with everybody, and like that'll be just the normal route. And given what I just thought of, that will probably be the storyline that goes from chapters 1 to 7. Then, starting in chapter 2, we had access to the weird route, and while being similar to like the genocide route in Undertale, focuses a lot more on seemingly not interacting with the story in the way it was intended. Like you're breaking the story. And my theory was that starting in chapter 3, we'll get access to 3 paths. We'll get the normal path, we'll get a weird route path, which involves interacting with the world of each chapter in a way that is not intended or breaks it in some way. Like my hypothesis was that, since Torio's going to be in that chapter and she's an overprotective mother, that would involve running away from literally every encounter you have with her. And then the third route is essentially just the equivalent of the genocide route, where you're killing every Darkner you come across, sort of continuing on the violent aspects of chapter 2's weird route. Now, what if, as I said before, the regular game, quote unquote, or the quote unquote normal game, goes from chapters 1 to 7, but if you do one of the other routes, or do things in the other routes, or just do things in general, or just do specific things in general, like either in specific routes or anywhere, you gain access to those special chapters. Like, maybe if, when you complete the weird route, which could potentially hint towards what happened to Des and why she disappeared and stuff like that, maybe then that would unlock chapter 6, chapter 0, being a prequel, and maybe either being a flashback to when Chris was little and us seeing what actually happened back then, or maybe potentially even playing as somebody else other than Chris, or potentially playing as Des herself and like inadvertently causing whatever happened to make her disappear. And then you have other things that we haven't seen happen yet or don't know they're going to happen, that when done correctly or incorrectly would lead to chapters 8, 9, 10, yada yada, so on and so forth. Very, very interesting.
It makes sense for Toby to have logos for chapters 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I could even be persuaded to overlook chapters 8 and 9. But why is there a logo for chapter 10? That's the sort of thing you'd only do if you needed to make sure the animation works properly on 2-digit logos. And if that's the case, that just opens a whole other can of worms. For one, why does Toby keep describing his development towards chapters 3, 4, and 5, but not 6 and 7? Like, I know his plan is to work on 3, 4, and 5 simultaneously, but he doesn't even mention chapters 6 or 7 when he discusses pricing.
Yeah, that's the thing, because, like, again, this video was made, a year ago at this point, so this was obviously before Toby announced that chapters 3 and 4 would be released just by themselves in chapter 5 later on, because, chapters 3 and 4 kind of ballooned. So I'd very much imagine that, like, again, maybe 5 was pushed off to the side, and he's going to continue, like, working on then 5 and 6, and then 7, which presumably 7 will be the biggest chapter of them all, so, it's all by itself. But then where does chapters, or potential chapters 0, 8, 9, and 10 go in? Again, going back to my previous statement. Unless, potentially, he's been working on all these secret chapters in the background and just obviously not telling us, the player fan base, to not spoil things.
Like, will buying 5 also buy us chapters 6 and 7? I'm sorry if he secretly answered this somewhere, but I can't find it anywhere on the Deltarune website, the newsletters, or the Steam page. They all just act as if chapter 5 will be the final chapter, and... Wait. Huh? Anyway, as far as I can tell, the chapter select menu is the only place where chapters 6 and 7 are even referenced. And, with the way this menu is framed, I wouldn't even be shocked if some future update gave us the ability to scroll down, which is very bewildering, given the many narrative hints implying the game will reach a conclusion somewhere around the 7th day in-game. But what's extra bewildering is the code for the chapter select. If you've seen Molly's video on the series'
Yeah, I
meta-narrative,
have.
you may already know some of the game scripts are named in all caps, which has some very, very interesting implications. But what's even stranger is that when listing the chapters, there are 8 entries, including Chapter 0, which immediately causes my brain to succumb to the brain rot as I flash back to the gunner vessels and the voice crying out in the unused code. And can you really blame me? Video games nowadays have gotten so elaborate and meta about the chapter select menu, and Toby in particular already has all of this creepy lore established around the concept of unused or forgotten files and maps and even characters that it's almost impossible to look at this and not have flashbacks to games like Off, Doki Doki Literature Club, and Hatoful Boyfriend that weave the concepts of New Game Plus and plot-relevant menu options into the world and story.
Oh god, I forgot about that pigeon one. Again, I remember like years ago at this point, I watched a playthrough of it, and I had completely forgotten about just how weird the endings were and how violent some of them were.
And this gets even more difficult to ignore when Toby and Itoki Hana release a music video about this very idea on the anniversary of Deltarune, while peppering it with imagery that heavily emphasizes the connections between these lost and corrupted characters and worlds. But I know talking about this makes me sound even more unhinged than the IC conspiracy, so instead, let's try to look at this more objectively, shall we? Examining the surrounding code with all of the code reading prowess of your average loaf of bread, which is to say,
Yep,
basically none. I do see that 0 is the default value for the variables highest uncompleted chapter and highest completed chapter, which seems to change the wording of this screen when the player first boots up the game, prompting them to beat Chapter 1 first if they haven't already, while allowing the player to skip to Chapter 2 if they so wish. The way this code works is by comparing the highest incomplete chapter to the highest complete chapter. So, when playing the game for the very first time, both values are 0. Then, when the player has started Chapter 1 but not finished it, the highest uncompleted chapter jumps up to 1, while the highest complete remains 0. Then once it's complete, both values are 1, prompting it to ask if you'd like to begin Chapter 2, at which point, highest uncompleted becomes 2. And then, once Chapter 2 is beaten, both values are 2, which prevents it from providing any further prompts before the chapter select. So the most likely answer here is just that Toby created a Chapter 0 to make this part of the coding easier, since now he can set the code here to display whatever chapter was the highest completed without worrying about the fact that Chapter 1 will be an edge case.
Okay, yeah, okay, so I could definitely see that, given that, there was the whole thing of, the load, the save and load screens looking completely different when you first load up the game, so I could see that literally just being, there for that one part. Ah, God. That makes me sad now. Now no secrets, prequel, death chapter.
However, there is one very strange thing about the number of chapters that has been brought to my attention recently, and depending on how you interpret this could change everything we know about the chapters, the narrative, and even the man behind the tree. Ready?
Really?
If you dive into the game files and take a look at the music file names, you will find a song simply labeled W. Which plays exactly once in Chapter 1 when the mysterious voice from the opening tells us what our name is. We've already spoken about how the change in font, casing, and word choice seems to imply that this character right here might be a different person, hijacking or otherwise interrupting the first narrator creating the gunner vessel, presumably Gaster. And at the time, I figured this was an obvious calling card to Kara interrupting Gaster. Were that the case, I would assume W here is short for wind. Since the song the game plays for us in the nothingness after Kara destroys the world is F wind 2. So that would all check out. But when Chapter 2 released, we got another mysterious song, this time labeled simply D.
When is this played?
This has had me stumped for months, because why D? Normally, when there's a song like this in the soundtrack, Toby gives it a name like Tense or Heartbeat. and he generally only saves one-letter titles for songs that have some obvious reason for it, like Sound B for Battle. But as of right now, W and D are the only songs like this in all of Deltarune.
But where does D come from? I don't remember hearing that in the game.
And, hang on. W, D. If this pattern continues, this will mean that each chapter will give us one update to the unused code that seems to be trying to engage us in some kind of dialogue with some poor goner trapped in the dark, and one new song that starts with a single letter. And if chapter 3 gives us G, I think we all know what's coming next. But if this is true, this carries with it a few weird implications.
Wait, how many letters does Gaster have? Gaster. 6. So that would mean that to complete the pattern, you would need at least 8 chapters.
First, let's count those letters again. W, D, G, A, S, T, E, R. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Wait, now we have a problem.
Yeah,
R
exactly.
would be given to us whenever Chapter 8 releases, which means there would need to be 8 chapters, or one chapter would have to give us 2 letters, but that would be pretty odd, although perhaps this could be considered evidence that Chapter 0 will be used after all. Or perhaps this is meant to be a hint about the gameplay of the ending. Already, there are a lot of little things suggesting the narrative of this game might require something of a restart or a return to the beginning of the game to fully complete. And you know what happens when you type the final letter of Gaster? It restarts. But this creates a very unsettling dilemma.
So now potentially that could mean that you put in, Gaster as a name, and when the game is finished, that unlocks something.
All this time, we've assumed the man behind the tree is Gaster. After all, his song has a moderately convincing reference to Gaster's motif. He is described as a nameless, appearance-less man who remains unnoticed by most and vanishes immediately after discovery. And in particular, the Spamton ARG has no one telling us a story about a white egg that unexplainably appears and then disappears in her game, and whose name seems to have somehow faded from her memory, almost like this name doesn't like to be stored or repeated. But this song, allegedly bearing his initials, is accessed by beginning the route that locks you off from the egg. So, this raises a really weird question that I never thought I'd have to ask myself. Is the weird route, aka the Snowgrave route, the Gaster route? Or does such a concept even apply here? Like, don't get me wrong, if Gaster is a parallel to Flowey, I imagine he'll make significant appearances in both routes, but I think we can all agree that, in Undertale, the Jenna route is the route that Flowey encourages us to take, since it's a mirror of the philosophy he has already adopted. So I guess what I'm asking here is, does Gaster want us to do this? Does he want to see if we can break the boundaries of the game and reveal just how dark the story can get, a la Darker Yet Darker? Or does he oppose this and see it as us contaminating his perfect little experiment by introducing new variables and conditions he never could have prepared for?
The only parameter he could never have thought of: ultra-violence.
One hand, this song is tense and has a sort of evil vibe to it, like a choir of cultists chanting and urging us to proceed with what could be considered something of a sacrifice. But on the other hand, this is also the song that plays when Noelle starts to snap out of it. Just before this moment, and she was quiet, entranced, and cooperative, to a point where she seemed almost eager to go along with what we were doing. Whereas when this song starts playing, she seems horrified, like she's starting to question this. And in that context...
Okay, that's why I don't remember the song. I never went on a weird route, okay.
You could frame this as her waking up, and the song is something like a scared heartbeat, urging her to abandon this terrible path. Wait, now that I think about it, Wake is also the name of her action when you start the battle on this route, isn't it? And where did we hear that first song again?
When you wake up at the beginning of the game.
When Chris wakes up at the start of Chapter 1. Dang, now I gotta do a deep dive on that, don't I? But, what do you all think?
Oh god, haven't seen that one before. Oh god, is Deltarune all a dream? Oh no! I just thought of a horrifying thought. So Deltarune, the reason for its creation was because Toby had a dream about like the ending to a game, couldn't figure out how to make it, and then, you know, he made Undertale, and years later Deltarune happened. So can you imagine if like the end of this game revealed that it was literally all a dream? Like, either like it's just some monster waking up from a dream and going about their day in the underground, or maybe it was like Chara, as they're lying there dying, like this is the dream they're having, and they're like sick, buttercup poisoned coma or whatever. Again, actually thinking about it, I've said before, I'm pretty sure the fandom would riot if it turned out that Gaster had nothing to do with this game. Now I'm wondering, like, which would be worse? A Gaster not being involved with the story of this game at all, or the entire game being a dream? Which would be worse?
Could this be evidence for the reset theory? Is this the theme of waking, or another motif for Gaster? And what even is Gaster, anyway? Let me know what you think down in the comments. And until next time.
What is Gaster's alignment? At this point, until we learn more, I believe like a post I saw on Tumblr once does best. He's lawful, chaotic. He has a strict moral compass, but nobody can figure out what it is. It's stuff like this. Like I had no idea that all of these like loading screen sprites had been discovered. Like the circles I hang out with and watch online when it comes to Deltarune haven't really talked about that. It's amazing the stuff you can learn and the questions you can ask in a simple like 13-minute video like this. Like at this point, Toby's gonna take like a full decade to release, you know, Deltarune, and we're all gonna be old and gray by the time chapter 7 comes out, and who knows, that might not even be the last chapter when it's done. Oh god. But yeah, that's gonna be it for now. So yeah, of course, as always, original videos linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet for some reason. Corner video lead to my Let's Play of the day. And yeah, with all out of the way, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.